So just a few days ago, I published a video about this open letter that was published by a small group of so-called Afrikaners, in which they distance themselves from what they describe as narratives, according to which the Afrikaner people are being targeted under the ANC government in South Africa. The letter was signed by a group of people that were described as influential, predominantly academics, some journalists, some theologians, and people who are broadly speaking on the left of the political spectrum. People who are also very detached from realities on ground level in South Africa. Now, it turns out that this letter was not just some spontaneous initiative, but in fact an initiative of the South African government, or at least an initiative of people working for the South African government. It was revealed in the papers today that a government official working for the Department of International Relations and Cooperation drafted the first draft of the letter, then reached out to some of the signatories, including people like Piet Kroukamp, explained to them why it's necessary for them to sign this letter, why it's important to take a stance against these so-called narratives, and then started recruiting people to sign this letter. Now, the person who was responsible for this letter, who wrote the first draft, initially denied this when confronted. Then, when she was confronted with the actual evidence, the WhatsApp messages and so forth, she actually conceded this. Piet Kroukamp, who's one of the signatories, evidently still denies his involvement with this initiative, or at least the government's involvement. He claims that it was his own personal initiative. But it has become very clear that this was indeed an initiative that was pursued by the ANC government in South Africa. Now, I want to talk about the word idiot. We know the word idiot as a word that refers to a person with low intelligence, but that's not what the word meant originally. In ancient Greek, the word idios meant something that could be translated in modern English as private. So the word idios, from which the word idiot derives, originally didn't mean a person of low intelligence. It meant a person that has detached himself from the community. The Greek view of a healthy life, or a healthy citizen, or a contributing citizen, was a person who was active in the oikia and the agora. That is to say, someone who fulfills his place in his home as a father, for example, as a husband and so forth, but also in the marketplace, where he actively participates in the activities and the tasks of the community. And so, in ancient Greek, someone who abandoned his responsibilities to his people was called an idiot. Now, in our modern translations, the word idiot has come to mean something else, but it is quite relevant to remember what the word idiot initially meant. Someone who turns his back on his own people. And now, during the Cold War, we had the term useful idiot that came to the fore. It's a term that's generally attributed to Vladimir Lenin, although there's not really evidence that it was actually Vladimir Lenin who came up with the term. But who came up with it is not relevant for this matter. What is relevant is the meaning of the term useful idiot. A useful idiot, according to contemporary political theory, is someone who seems to be uninvolved with a particular case, who appears to be at a distance, but who, with or without his consent, or with or without his explicit approval, has become something like a pawn for a broader political or ideological agenda. And so what this means, if we were to draw this back to this so-called letter, is that what we are dealing with in South Africa with these people is the quintessential useful idiots. It's a bunch of people who have turned their backs on their own community, who have become some form of ethno-masochist or oikophobe, in other words, people who find some form of joy when their own people suffer, or who instinctively deny the troubles or the suffering that their own people are going through, and who instinctively side with the people who are doing the suppression or the persecution. Now, if we were to consider the ancient Greek meaning of the word, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that these people are unintelligent. In fact, we are dealing with academics, and we have come to learn over the last century that oftentimes it is the academics who are to blame, largely at least, for some of the worst atrocities that have been committed. Because the academics, in many cases, are detached from realities. They live in their proverbial ivory towers, air-conditioned offices, where they are out of touch and out of tune with the real issues that the people or their people are facing. But they have become so consumed in their academic theory that that has become their worldview. And so they become cold to their own people. And what we are dealing with here is a group of people who are not unintelligent, but who have certainly turned their backs on their own people, and who are willingly or unwillingly or unconsciously participating in the ideological agenda of the ANC and their ideological alliance partners, which includes the EFF and other groups in South Africa. Because there are some real problems in this country, including the fact that there are more than 140 race laws discriminating against a small minority community on the basis of their skin color, including a serious problem with farmers being attacked and tortured on their farms, including some of the most influential politicians in the country actively and openly chanting about exterminating this particular community, including serious problems with government dysfunction. And yes, government dysfunction is affecting everyone. But the South African government and those in power in South Africa are making no secret, or have made no secret, of their anti-white and anti-Afrikaner agenda. And we see this in the examples I mentioned, but also in the motivations they use for why it's necessary to confiscate private property without compensation. Now, with all these things happening in South Africa, it's obviously necessary to take a firm stance against this. It's obviously necessary to raise alarm, to campaign against this, and to get international support. But the instinctive reaction of these useful idiots is to try to discredit those who are raising the alarm, to side with those who are doing the persecution. But fortunately, it is quite evident that they are a very small and a very isolated group. And if we learn anything from this whole endeavor, it is that we should not stop. We should not stop talking about these issues. We should not stop campaigning against these issues. And we should not stop raising local and international awareness about what is happening in South Africa.